Hi Chris, how are you?
Good afternoon, Rod. I am well, and we're on episode 162.
We are. We don't often say good afternoon, do we?
We don't. We're recording on Saturday afternoon. Largely my fault, I think, because I've got parental duties tomorrow. So it is the 1st of March, though. So it's quite cool. It's nice it's the 1st of March. Seems like the right day for us to start a podcast. But, we're 2 months into the year. Yeah, be all right.
And I can say Happy St. David's Day.
It is St. David's Day, of course. Where are my manners? Happy St. David's Day. Are you doing anything for St. David's Day?
Absolutely not. I should probably try that in Welsh. It's Hapus Dewi Sant or something like that.
Fair play, your Welsh is far superior to mine.
I've been here longer than you were.
Yeah, that's fair. You've been there a good 20 years longer than me, if not more. Yeah, it's St. David's Day, so there you go. It's title, St. David's Day.
Title St. David's Day, unless we say something more interesting, because that's generally the way we go.
Hopefully. Should we dive straight into follow-up?
Let's do some follow-ups. Did you get your Kindle books downloaded?
I did download my Kindle books using a video link that you sent me, which was actually quite a cool thing. So it's go on YouTube, basically using another tool that you can use to script a website. Basically meant you could go and log into your Amazon account, and using this scripting tool, which I'd never used before, it just went through and clicked all the links and saved your books for you. I thought it was quite neat, and it was quite nice because I didn't have to install anything or do too much. So I thought it was quite cool.
Yeah, it wasn't the original link I gave, was it? It was the other thing. But actually, I'm with you. It was some sort of monkey thing, Script Monkey, I think is what it was called. You had to download, and then it basically processed the Amazon web form for you and pressed all the buttons on your behalf, with a little bit of script that you could modify for Amazon.co.uk or how quickly you should get the videos and all that kind of stuff. And you had to do it page by page, and it broke, I found, if you had samples downloaded.
Okay. I didn't have that.
If maybe you've never done it, but if you downloaded the odd chapter of something here and there, then it would break on the chapter thing. But once past that, by the time I got to the end of my 147 books, I think it was in the end.
I had 102. I've just put a link in the show notes to the video, but it was kind of cool. And it was quite a cool. It was just a cool thing to do. So I did that, and then what was the other tool I had to install? Calibre. Which then allowed me to link my serial number for my Kindle, so I could then just decrypt the DRM on it. But yeah, quite a cool workaround.
Yeah, and then there was another component, DDRM, to take the DRM off that. So Calibre lets you open it and read it, and once it was un-DRM'd, you could then export it to another format. And I'm not sharing these. We didn't share them with each other or anything. It's literally so I was able to read the books that I'd bought.
Yeah, I'm not planning to do anything else with it other than pop them on my Mac as my server and go, right, there's my books. If ever Amazon decides to take a book away from me that I've legitimately paid for, that's all I want to do with it, really. I've still got my Kindle. I love my Kindle, but it's just nice to know that you've got a backup, I guess.
Yeah, I think so. So good, we both did that. I hope you out there in the world, if you had the ability to do so, did as well, because it's not the kind of thing you want to lose access to.
No, and it does make me wonder, can I do this to my Audible books? And I've got a couple of Apple iBooks or whatever they're called these days. And, it's all those things I need to look at. That's a job for another day, though.
I have already done my Audible books. I think we've talked about that before.
I've got hundreds as well. So that's something, again, it's just having that backup in case they take it away is my big concern.
Yeah, absolutely. Shall we move on and talk about something that isn't a surprise?
I thought this was already done. I can't believe this is news.
Yeah, I felt the same, really. So the news is that Microsoft is shutting down Skype in favour of Teams. And the reason this is in follow-up and not news is, actually, I think we both thought this was already happening.
Yeah, I think we thought this was a done deal. A bit like Apple TV being on Android. I can't believe they're only just doing it now, because obviously Teams really got going in 2020, got obviously loads of traction, post-COVID. And here we are 4 years later, and they still seem to be running Skype. So great. We need to start turning off old stuff. Come on, Microsoft.
It's a bit of a weird one, though, isn't it? Because as with many things, Skype was not a Microsoft product. They bought it from, I think, the same people that did Kazaa, wasn't it, way back in the day?
Yeah, because it used to use peer-to-peer, didn't it, for Skype to function.
Yeah, so that was the thing with it. And back in the day, it was the way you talk to people on the computer. It was ubiquitous, for want of a better word. Really impressive product. I think people still use it for places that are behind firewalls. I think, people in China can use Skype to Skype out of China without it going through other bits and pieces and it gets past the Great Firewall. I don't know if that was maybe a factor in either Microsoft keeping it around or getting rid of it. I wouldn't like to speculate. But yeah, you've got a product like Teams. Why would you keep Skype about?
Yeah, and you're right. Skype was amazing at the time because, if you're running like a small business, you could buy a phone number, like a London number, point it to Skype. It would cost you like £10 a month, and you'd have a legitimate London phone number, and you could be in your home office. And I used to do that back in the late 2009, 10, somewhere around there, probably a bit earlier, because you want to make yourself look like you're a big proper business with the landline, but you don't want to go and actually get your telephone company to run another landline to your property. It was a great thing, and it was ahead of its time, and obviously it turned good for Microsoft because they ended up buying Skype. They then had Link, which was their corporate one, and they kind of munged the two together, and then we ended up with Teams. So it was wise for Microsoft to buy it, but I think like some of these things, they've perhaps held on to it a little bit too long.
As with many things, it might have been wise for them to buy it, but then you've also removed potential competition for anything you want to release down the line. And Microsoft would never think of doing something like that, I'm sure. But yeah, I mean, that's a factor. One interesting thing about Skype, and it is in the Verge article that we've linked to, is that Skype you bought credit for, so you'd outgoing call credit, and apparently Microsoft are going to honour that. I'm not sure what form that will take. Do you end up with Teams credit instead?
You'd have thought they'd just go, you had £10 on Skype, we just moved it to Teams for you, enjoy.
But does that work like that? I don't know enough about the corporate integration of Teams, frankly.
Or how we use Teams in a personal sense. I'll be honest, I don't know enough either. But it feels like they're doing it in the right way, and they've certainly not rushed to kill it, have they?
No, you can't accuse them of that. But if you're out there and you're looking for alternatives now, I don't know what that will be. It's either Teams, Zoom, Jitsi.
Probably Zoom's quite high up the list, I'd have thought.
I'd have thought so, but again, I don't know how well that functions in countries behind particular firewalls and things like that. So I think there's a bit of research that has to be done.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Moving on, we talked about the iPhone, and I quite like the new nickname that's appeared for it, the 16i. Probably spoken in an Italian accent, because I think it comes from Vitici on one of the, oh gosh, I forgot the name of the
Connected podcast co-host.
Connected podcast, and then they have a website as well. But in his Italian accent, and I'll try not to butcher it, is a 16i, that kind of voice that he had. I quite like that. Will we get a 17i at some point? I don't know.
Feels like we're going to.
Well, that's the way it is. Anyway, the most interesting feature, and I did watch Marquez's review of the iPhone 16e, and he couldn't work out who it was for.
So I listened to a podcast, and somebody had written into the podcast, and they said, maybe the E is for enterprise. And I did put this in our show notes, and I think that's it, because I'm an enterprise buyer. This is the exact phone I would buy for my enterprise. Because you want a cheapish handset that's got an okay camera, just need one camera. Most people just charge with a cable, and you want it to be modern-ish, but you don't want to spend money on the bleeding edge. So for me, as an enterprise buyer, this is the phone I would buy, because historically we used to buy a phone 2 years behind the current production model, because it hit around the £500 mark here in the UK without VAT. That's what we're targeting. And this phone does that perfectly. And it means that they get a more recent phone that's got more recent internals that will run Apple Intelligence, assuming that's going to be a feature at some point. And it will probably last longer because it will be supported by the OSs longer. So I'm a big fan of this phone for the enterprise, for the corporate buyer.
I don't think the E means enterprise. I think that's just what they called it. I mean,
I don't think it does mean enterprise, but yeah, I don't disagree with you there. I just think it is a good target for that phone, though. Is that buyer that's buying them in hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, and just want a standard phone to give their employees.
Apple, when asked, said it's the phone for everyone, but the E doesn't mean everyone. I don't think the E means enterprise. I think it's been a long time since Apple made anything with the enterprise in mind. They may, as an aside, sell to the enterprise by them hitting a price point, but I don't think this is targeted at that market at all. It'll end up there, potentially.
I think I would 100% this will be enterprise buying phone, 100%.
Well, there are cheaper Android phones with more features that you could probably have more control over as an IT department.
If you're buying iPhones, this is the phone enterprises will buy.
Yeah, maybe. Anyway, I'm not going to argue with you too much on that point, but
should we talk about the modem? Let's talk about the modem.
That's what we're going to be talking about, is the modem. The C1 has surprisingly proven to be, it's all right,
So the C1 is Apple's first solar modem, as we talked about last week. So they've taken all their smarts because they bought Intel modem business, and they announced, right, we're doing the C1. And we've been waiting years for this modem to come along. I always thought when they brought out the modem, it would be in the A chip. So, you'd have your A chip and you'd have your modem in it and Bluetooth and Wi-Fi and everything lumped together. But they've obviously not done that this time around. But basically what they're saying, I think you've nailed it, is actually the C1's pretty good for first effort. And maybe this is why Apple have waited so long, so that they've got it right. So at least it's comparable to what's out there now. And you can see it's probably where Apple's going to iterate year on year, because the process is getting quicker and quicker, but it's not really a selling point anymore. Nobody's complaining their phones are slow. What they're going to now do is surely make the C2, the C3 get better and better year on year of battery life, performance when there's no signal, and all of those kinds of things. You can see where Apple's going to hopefully add some value to it. So it's interesting, but it's good they got a first one out the door, and it's all right.
Well, I think the all right bit is important because it's quite hard to make a decent cellular radio, and the only skin in the game so far has been Qualcomm. Apple bought this chip from Intel, or bought the know-how to make this chip from Intel, and when they previously put an Intel modem in an Apple phone, it was the bad one. I want to say the iPhone 7. Some of the iPhone 7s had.
Yeah, there was like a 50-50 chance of what you'd end up with.
Yeah, and they couldn't get the same sort of speed download as you could with the Qualcomm chips. So if you knew what you were looking for, you looked for your iPhone with a Qualcomm chip and not the Intel chip. Apple bought them. They didn't buy the smartest guys in the room or the smartest product in the room at that time, but they've had a lot of time to think about it. And I think you and I both listened to ATP, and there was a lot of talk on ATP about how much cell chips or modem chips do these days. The frequencies they work at, how hard they've got to work. Qualcomm obviously got lots of smarts in this. You could see a world where Apple did build this all into their silicon, and you could just have that going forward. I bet they still wouldn't build it into the Mac, though, to give you your always-on cellular Mac. That seems to be something they're very against. But I thought the fact that this is good enough so far in testing and everything is great. I kind of still wait for there to be a scandal. But if not, I presume we won't see this C2 or the C1 in the iPhone 17s. It'll probably be the iPhone 18 line that we see it across the line, as long as it maintains this sort of success.
Yeah, I mean, they've probably already got the 17 worked out. There was talk that the C1 might go into the 17 Air, but I guess they're going to want their Apple modem to be a good position before it's in the mainstream phones that's selling exponentially more than this model. So this is probably the right phone for them to try it in. I thought they might have tried it in an iPad or something first, but it's probably 2 years away from this being in every device they sell. You can see them doing it, can't you?
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting in the 95 Mac article that we've linked to that they say it isn't more efficient than the Qualcomm modems that came before. It's just the fact that the iPhone 16e has a better battery.
Could be.
And that's interesting.
Could be. But you'd like to think they're going to do something to add value to it. There's got to be a reason why they're doing it, unless it's just to make it cheaper.
I think cheaper for them. They like to own the stack, don't they? They like to own everything in every part of the phone. I'm sure if they could make their own screens, they would.
Yeah, you're probably right. But I think they like to own everything, especially where they can add value. So I reckon we will get a Mac out of this eventually.
We shall see, I guess. Shall we move on and talk about UK spying?
Ugh. I was all excited about modems, and now we've got to go back to Spygate.
Yeah, we should maybe think about scheduling our stories a little bit better. So this is just a response to what we talked about last week when the UK government demanded that Apple either give them access to everybody in the world's encrypted iCloud or get out, basically. And Apple decided to get out, switch it off for UK users. New UK users can't have it. And it seems that the current American administration agrees with this, that they think Apple, as UK has broke trade regulations and things like that by demanding that Apple build in an iCloud backdoor. I mean, I don't have the greatest respect for the current United States administration. Sorry, I don't think that's that controversial thing to say. Once upon a time it would have been. But on this, I'm kind of with them. I don't think there's any requirement for an American company to have to cave to United Kingdom law that it opens to everybody.
Yeah, I concur with you there. It's international law is complicated, though, isn't it?
International law is complicated, but this is complemented by our second story about this, that it's obviously the FBI and others are thinking about this too. They'd quite like access to these encrypted backups too. So this is a story in Forbes from February 24th about potentially the FBI warning iPhone and Android users that actually they're going to want exactly the same thing, presumably just for American citizens in this case. But this is going to happen all over the world.
Yeah, do you think we're going to reach a point where this advanced data protection, I think it's called, I probably forgot the name wrong, do you reckon we're going to end up with that being turned off globally at some point?
This is what everybody wants, it seems to me.
Well, this is what every government wants and every consumer does not want.
And we've said it a million times in this show, we'll probably say it a million times. I understand both sides of the argument. I understand when it comes to terrorism, child sexual abuse material, all that kind of stuff. Of course the government won't access to that. But at the same time, people have a right to privacy. You can't open a backdoor just for the good guys. We've seen that with the Chinese hack of the United States networks and their messaging, where you've got the FBI, the NSA, and the CIA saying everybody switch to a secure messaging platform. What happens when the bad guys get access to everybody's encrypted, not just iPhone backups in this case, but whatever the Android equivalent is?
Yeah. It's tricky, isn't it? Because look, if somebody's broken the law, I want the FBI or the MI5 or whoever it is to get access to it. But for your average Joe, I want them to have some security, and I like to consider myself an average person that's not doing anything dodgy, but I just don't want my data leaked across the internet because it will be a pain for me. And it feels like there needs to be a better middle ground, but I don't know what that middle ground is. I don't think I've got a good solution for it, which is why I can see we've got a very binary solution, haven't we? We either have encryption or we don't have encryption. There's not that middle ground where you've got, you people here that aren't under any investigations, you can be encrypted, and you people over there that we know shouldn't be encrypted. So I don't know. I just don't know what the solution is. What do you think?
Well, I think encryption is the solution, but I think it's on law enforcement to find other ways into bad actors' phones and devices, frankly. You shouldn't be able to, a law enforcement agency should not be able to just come and poke around your network because they feel like it, and
it's like needing a warrant to search a house, isn't it?
Yeah, whatever that looks like. And I'm not suggesting that the UK government were doing this. I presume they would have all the right legal manifestations in place in order to be able to get into somebody's iCloud account. But like I say, where that line is drawn and how much privacy people are entitled to before that line is drawn, I think is really questionable depending on who your government is. I suspect that given the current United States administration, if they really didn't like another senator on the other side of the floor, they might do something like this to be able to poke around and find something discrediting within that. And we've seen that in other states and countries around the world where they have done that. Pegasus spyware being a case in point. So I think this is a really dangerous ground for all law enforcement agents to be stepping on. That I have no problem with them once they have sufficient cause to breaking into people's houses, attempting to break into people's devices, and finding whatever they can in order to stop CSAM or terrorism or other criminal activity. But that line is really, you got to be very careful with that.
You have. So I'm just trying to process. I'm annoyed that I can't think of what the right solution is, if you know what I mean. That's why I think I'm struggling.
It's not a surprise you can't think of the right solution, because I don't think there really is one. It's the rights of the person versus the rights of the state that are,
Yeah, they're at conflict, aren't they, at the moment?
And in our democratic, and I won't put the scare quotes around it, countries that we live in at the moment, we've tended towards the rights of the person over the rights of the state longer and longer. I just feel like it's swinging back the other way.
100%.
Should we move on and talk about something just as depressing?
Come on.
Slightly, well, not just as depressing. At the Apple shareholder meeting a couple of weeks back, you and I have both declared I've got an Apple share, so I got asked about this via the app that I've bought my share with. As an Apple shareholder, how would I feel Apple should vote about DEI and what the United States government are proposing to get rid of DEI initiatives across corporate America? And I said they shouldn't, and I think all the rest of the shareholders said the same thing, but apparently even that may not be enough. Despite the fact Apple themselves are behind it, they were advising shareholders to do so. Tim Cook has come out this week and said, well, we may need to change because this is the view of the United States government. A sigh doesn't make great podcasting.
It doesn't, but it summarises the point, though. I just can't believe, in one breath he's trying to stop what he's calling World War III with Poland. In the next breath he's trying to rule out all DEI policies, practices across the whole of America. And I don't know. In some hands, I feel great. He's trying to out-resolve a war. I'm not saying he's doing it the right way, but he's trying to do that. And then on the other hand, we're taking 20 years step backwards in our DEI practices, which I don't necessarily agree with.
Yeah, it's not 20 years. It's back to the 1960s, and it's back
it's
to the 1980s for apartheid in South Africa, and it's not that bad yet, but the worry is that's the path that we're walking. And as I've got this BBC News article over, I'm seeing all the things on the right about what happened with Vladimir Zelensky yesterday, and I can't really cope, so let's look at another story quickly.
I have one question for you.
Yeah.
On the link that you put in the show notes for that one story, it's a .amp link, an AMP link, which I've not seen before for that BBC story. Have you ever used AMP links before?
So that's an Android link is what that is. And I was briefly in my Android phone for a couple of hours this week as I was testing a couple of things out. And obviously that's where I picked up the story from.
Okay. I just hadn't, because it just popped me up a different alert saying this is an AMP one. Do you want the BBC to collect data and analytics and stuff? And I was like, oh yeah, I didn't really know what the difference was. That's why I was just questioning it.
There you go. I'm glad I could answer your question.
Well
One thing we have another question of is how much the Trump administration is going to tax any nation that dares to tax its big tech. So they've been very bullish on how they're going to put taxes on everything. They've managed to annoy the Canadians almost instantly when they came to office. So that in itself is quite interesting. But having a go at one of the American big tech companies and trying to tax them is going to lead to tariffs back to those nations. So obviously, if we think of the EU in particular with trying to tax what Apple was doing within the European area and within Ireland for its tax break there, that's going to come back and bite them. This is very pro-business by Trump.
Yeah, this is tricky though, isn't it? Because, and I guess I don't know a huge amount about it. I'm no international shopfront person that does retail in all these countries, but you're then trying to get your revenue back to the, well, in this case the US, but you're selling in, Australia and European countries. Yeah, does tax get taken at the point of sale? How do you tax the corporation? It's a minefield, isn't it? You can see why this stuff's so complicated.
It is complicated. America is not the sort of sparkling angel when it comes to taxing itself or other companies, though.
Agreed.
Have you come across the Cautionary Tales podcast by Tim Harford?
Nope.
So there was this week's story, which is about Ernest Borgnine, of all things, who you may remember is a very famous actor from sort of 50s, 60s, 70s, survived all the way up till 2012, I think, and died at the ripe old age of 80-something. Fantastic actor, won an Academy Award for a film called Marty, which was a black and white thing. The only reason he got a chance to star in a film at all, because he was seen as sort of a heavy who hung around in the background of films, was due to Hollywood tax breaks. So it was more Hollywood studios used to get taxed at 95% for the films they made. So the actors barely made anything on their films. So a lot of the production companies were more geared around writing films off for tax reasons, so the producers could go off and open oil fields, than they were for anything else. I mean, it's a fantastic story, and I'd recommend you go and listen to this week's Cautionary Tales podcast. But this kind of stuff with America, Apple started making things in the EU because there were tax breaks in order to do so. So they have made, as has Facebook, as has Netflix, as has Amazon, all of the large American companies have made a lot of money from bringing that, wealth they've earned in other countries back to the United States. Were they taxed on it in the United States?
I don't know.
Exactly. It's opaque, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really opaque, and that is probably why they employ so many financy people, is to work out the best practices to pay the smallest amount of tax possible. And what do they call it? Repatriating their money.
And I understand why, it's good due diligence as a business to try and get as much money back as you can to return to your investors and your stakeholders and everybody who's involved with your business. At the same time, it's a bit, he said, she said when it comes to these kinds of things. But something we've got to watch out for, because this isn't just Apple and, Apple and Facebook and the big players we talk about, Google. It is companies like Facebook, HBO, all the other ones that are actually out there in the world that American money flows to and from.
Yeah, and it is a lot of American companies that have got this stage, as it were, where they are selling internationally.
Yeah. Shall we move on and do some news?
Let's do it.
Okay, so the first one, speaking of American companies, is that Instagram had a bit of a whoopsie this week where apparently, instead of people logging on and seeing the nice cat and dog videos, saw a flood of gore and violence and dead bodies sweeping over Instagram. This is a story from The Guardian earlier this week.
Yeah, I was reading this earlier, and I'm not a social media person, so it's just passed me by, but that's not good, is it? I mean, you've got people logging into their account and they're seeing potential material that could be very bad. I mean, you've got video clips of people dying or being attacked. You've got very gory stuff. It's not like it's animated and slapsticky, very real stuff that I would want to see. And can you imagine how many other people would want to see it as well? But Meta, sadly, haven't really come back with a great response for it. They're just like, yeah, sorry, we're the problem. It's fixed.
Yeah, it's not good enough.
But there's no explanation for how it's happened. That's what I think is more frustrating.
Yeah, so this was in Reels, which is their sort of very short video thing where you can publish, I think it's about 30 seconds worth of videos. Obviously, for Vine and other things that came about from that short form way. But presumably it's mostly younger people make use of that. Most older people like longer form things. They like to read it. They're on Facebook, not Instagram perhaps. And they're expecting their cat videos. They're not expecting this kind of thing to happen. And I agree with you. I think the apology is substandard. They could have done an awful lot better with that. And part of me really fears for this kind of thing because this is the algorithm, isn't it? The algorithm bubbles what it thinks you want to see and how you are going to be maximized on that platform to keep you just passively consuming what's washing over you from these videos. So how quickly the algorithm can lead you astray is really quite a terrifying thing.
And especially if we're going to have less and less human moderators, because they've already announced cuts in that area and fact checking and what have you. This could become more of a problem if the algorithm goes more rogue as life goes on.
That is a very good point. If all this is a moderation note that's left on these kinds of videos, as both X and Meta are going to do from here on, because you're not got that human touch in it, this is not going to get better.
I don't think this will improve one iota.
Oh gosh, I thought we were going to have a more cheerful show this week rather than all this gloom, doom and depression. Tell you what, tell us about Amazon and its new Alexas.
Yeah, so I must confess, obviously you've put the show notes together with this one, and I did not hear anything this week about Alexa Plus. It just seemed to have passed me by, so apologies on that, but I have gone through and read some of this because I was like, oh, Alexa Plus. I do get annoyed with companies all using the same naming conventions, I must confess. So I'm obviously making reference to the Plus here because you get Disney Plus, and Disney were one of the first out the gates, I think, with Disney Plus. And obviously Apple have lent into the Plus naming for literally everything. But anyway, Alexa Plus is coming, and I guess the problem I've got is I don't use any Alexa products, so I don't know how good or bad current Alexa is. But this is a service that's going to be $19.99 a month. But if you're Prime customer, you can get it. But you're going to be able to do way more, apparently, like order groceries and send your friends invites. But I thought you could do all this stuff anyway with your Alexa. Because it felt like when they brought the dots out, and I can't remember what all the other speakers are called, but it felt like they'd already nailed that. So you could go, hey Alexa, order me toothpaste. I thought that was already in the main domain. So I don't really understand what the difference is between what we currently have and what this is. This feels like version 2. Hopefully it's going to be better than what we're experiencing in the Apple ecosystem. They're also dropping that you don't need to use the Hey word anymore. You would just be able to say Alexa. They're going to have an app on your phone that they're updating, the website, and apparently on the website you can do more long form, as they call it. So it's going to be interesting to see what it looks like. But obviously this is their Copilot, Apple Intelligence equivalent. So it's interesting they're still obviously investing heavily in this space, because there was talk of Amazon scaling back a lot of their work because they just weren't, making the income out of it. But they are obviously investing in this. And if you look at the screen grab, they've got all the devices on. They've got a laptop, a phone, their show devices, their dot devices, their other speakers, picture frames by the looks of it, computers. So it's quite interesting that they're really investing heavily. And they've also got, I'm going to mangle the gentleman's name, but Panos Panay from what was Microsoft's Surface leading a lot of this. So I wonder how much influence he's had of, really gelling them to go, right, we're going to have an initiative and we're going to do it everywhere, and we're going to have a suite of products that will support this Alexa Plus, innovation. But it looks quite interesting, and hopefully it will help Apple and Copilot and others to they need competition, don't they? So hopefully it'll help all of them to improve.
Yeah, I think the early devices, Amazon were definitely leading the world in this. When the Alexa came out, that
was
thing.
like 10 years ago, though, wasn't it?
It was. In fact, I vaguely remember listening to the very first Trump inauguration via an Alexa device, and it sounded terrible and kept dropping out on me. But it was the kind of thing you could say, hey, thingamajig. I don't want to set off anybody's Alexas. Hey, thingamajig, play this, and it would play BBC sounds. You could add things to your reminders list. I remember standing at the fridge shouting out a bunch of things to add to a reminders list, and it did it. So, or tell me a joke, and that sort of early initiation of voice-controlled stuff. Alexa was very much at the forefront of that and fell behind. I switched mine off years ago because I got fed up of it continually trying to sell me stuff, basically. And all that was useful for is if there was a yellow ring on it, I knew that my package was going to be delivered today. But frankly, I knew that anyway. And then there was a few scandals about it listening to you all the time in order to better differentiate what you were saying. Amazon, not the only company to have had that, mind. Apple been through that scandal too. So I'm not blaming Amazon. Well, I am blaming Amazon for that, but I equally blame Apple for that. They need to move it on. And I understand that, as you said already, that they weren't making a lot of money from these devices. They sold them at a very knockdown price. People weren't really using them. It's quite expensive to produce electronics at scale, even if you are Amazon. And I'm just sitting around gathering dust. I can understand they want to maximize that. So, I mean, fair play. They've got out and they've done that. And the fact that you can do new things, one of the examples given in the linked article is find me this particular scene in a movie and it will jump to it. And that's quite clever. I could just use the fast forward button on my remote control, presumably, and do the same sort of thing. But, it's there. And then a slightly creepy example, also in the linked article. Pane asked Alexa if anyone had walked the dog recently, and it referenced smart home cameras to respond that yes, someone had.
Yeah. I don't know. I think the problem I have with a lot of these things is I don't often want to talk to something. I'm listening to a podcast or I'm listening to some music, and therefore when I want to put eggs on the shopping list, I just grab my phone, quickly do it, put my phone back away and move on. So that's the bit I don't like. And I'm the same in the car when I'm driving. Rather than dictate text messages, I'll just wait till I finish and pull up, and then I'll send my text messages, or I listen to it or read whatever's been sent. And I think that's the problem I have with it is, I guess because I'm always listening or watching something, that I don't want the audible interruption.
Yeah, I think that's fair. This isn't a device for me. I'm not really sure I want any of these things. I've gone around switching them off. In fact, I've switched off the integration between my Sonos devices, and I could pick at that point whether I wanted Alexa or I wanted the Google Home, and it's off everywhere. I'd rather just manage it on my phone. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and that's where I've ended up. Did you know one interesting thing, though? So from Amazon's webpage, they are saying Alexa Plus is there whenever you need her. So they're definitely calling it a lady, which I don't think I've seen anybody explicitly say that their voice assistant has a gender until I've read that today.
They have gendered their smart home device. Interesting.
I don't know why they've done that, but it was just interesting because, like I say, you just think of Siri, and Siri can be whatever gender you want if you want it to be a gender, because you can pick the voice, whereas they're obviously saying Alexa very much is a female.
I don't think I'm wrong in saying this. It has no gender. It's a collection of algorithms.
Well, that would be my view.
I think we should move out of this before we fall down a logical rat hole. Should we talk about Ubiquiti instead?
Your favourite topic. I'd love you to talk about this because I have read this article and I looked at it, and I think this is the problem I have with Ubiquiti. I think the devices look amazing. They've got some amazing functionality, but I've no idea what all the different ones are, of what they will do, of what ones. If ever I were to switch from my Eero world, which is fairly simplistic, if not a little bit expensive, to an Eero world, what I would need to buy to get into that ecosystem. So
I think you said that the wrong way around. You're already in an Eero world. You don't need to move to an Eero world.
Sorry, from an Eero world to a Ubiquiti world. My mistake.
All right, let me talk you through this. So basically what this is Ubiquiti aggressively updating their product line, which I'm all for. Networking seems to have had a bit of a jump recently, where we've been on 1 gig switching around the house with not very fast internet connections coming in, and Wi-Fi 5-ish access points kicking around. And we talked about this last week with the Eero upgrading their routers to Wi-Fi 7, or was it the week before? And I then went on a Ubiquiti kick at that point saying, they offer Wi-Fi 7 devices as well. Anyway, Ubiquiti are sort of aggressively pushing up through the line, where we're seeing 2.5 gig on almost all their switches now, as well as PoE, so power over Ethernet, on a lot of their switches too. And down that's across the range from their enterprise kit to their sort of small business kit, right through to what they don't really make home kit, they make sort of prosumer kit, but whatever, it's going through the range. And it seems complicated, but it's not as complicated as you think it is. What these things are that they've released this week are new cloud gateways, they call them, and that's sort of the entry point to the Ubiquiti network. So there's a small Express 7, there's a Dream Router 7, and then there's a Cloud Gateway Fiber. So this sort of gives you cheap-ish entry points to the Ubiquiti ecosystem, for want of a better thing. So, for example, these three devices, the Express 7 and the Dream Router 7, both have Wi-Fi built into them. They both have Wi-Fi 7 actually built into the devices, as well as being sort of the networking and management hub of the Ubiquiti ecosystem. So by that, I mean it will let you control the cameras, it will let you record from the cameras directly to these devices, so you can host them online. The Dream Router 7, which is a step up from the Express 7, not only can you put in an SD card to record as much video as you want, it has one PoE 2.5 gig socket in the back as well, so you can immediately drive another Wi-Fi router or a PoE webcam just from that device. So if you had no Ubiquiti stuff at all and wanted to drive a webcam, or you needed to provide power over Ethernet to a Wi-Fi 7 device, then the Dream Router 7 is the one to do, and it has 4 2.5 gig Ethernet slots in the back and one 10 gig, I think, SFP plus port, so you could actually drive a 10 gig switch off the back of this as well if you wanted, or a connection to a 10 gig switch.
That's quite cool. It's £264, by the way. Which
it is. And then you've got the Gateway Fiber, which is if you've got faster than gigabit Ethernet coming into your business or house, and lots of it. So if you have 2 or 3 inbound connections that you want to be able to, say, have failover or routes lots of internet around the place, this is a cheap way of getting into that, as well as having that networking and management interface. But it doesn't have the Wi-Fi built into it. So that's assuming you've already got Wi-Fi or you don't need it. So you've basically got 2 consumer-level devices with the first one and the second one, the Dream Router, and then you've got your more enterprise-facing one with the Cloud Gateway Fiber.
Gateway Fiber is £274, so £10 more than the Dream piece, but above it. I think they're quite good. I appreciate £270 isn't that cheap, but it's also not that scary in this day and age. It feels like very well priced, I'd say, for what you're getting.
No, and we were talking last week or the week before about £150 for one of the Wi-Fi 7 hotspots. The first 2 of these already have a £150 Wi-Fi hotspot built into them, effectively. So you're getting all the rest of it for free, and that's a very clever firewall. That's the ability to manage cameras. It's the ability to manage, I think in the case of the Dream Router 7, up to 30 other unified devices. So if you do need a lot of switching or wireless hotspots or cameras around your premises, this device will give you that for 240 quid. So I actually think it's a bit of a bargain.
It's a good price.
My first Ubiquiti device was the 2 version of this. It looks a bit like R2D2 with the legs, is the way I think about it. But that's sort of their consumer device where you've got a Wi-Fi hotspot built in at the top. In this particular version, you've got a screen giving you some information about your throughput of your data coming in and going out, and you've got that network connectivity at the back. So you could start with something like this, add another Wi-Fi hotspot somewhere in your house, or a webcam, a security camera. And once you've got that other equipment in place, you could view this as being upgradable later on to one of Ubiquiti's other devices.
Yeah, it's a great system, isn't it? I think I'm really quite interested in it. I'm not going to be doing this anytime soon, but I'm keeping a little side eye on where they're going with it, because I think some of this stuff looks great. It looks really well made, and you can build it out as and when you want to, which I think is quite cool.
Yeah, I've been very pleased with it, and I like the modularity of it, that I don't need to go and drop 500 quid on the next thing. Generally, it's about that sort of price, 150 to £250 to upgrade components of the system, and I can just gradually do that as I go along.
Yeah, no, it is cool.
It is cool. Do you want to tell us a little bit about Google Gemini?
Yeah, so Google Gemini have got their Code Assist out. So this is like Microsoft's GitHub Copilot. It's the equivalent of that. But basically, if you're an individual, you can use loads of it for free. And it's according to Google, you can do, I'm going to find the number here. You can do like 180,000 code completions a month, which is free. And then Microsoft's equivalent is 2,000. So, it kind of shows you what they're giving you above and beyond Microsoft. So I know Google's been playing catch up, but it's super interesting that they're really going for it and they want you to start using it. It looks kind of cool. I've not done any coding recently and I've not used any AI tools to help me code, but given that I'm probably quite behind on my skills, something like this looks quite appealing to help me learn what I'm doing.
I think this is quite cool, and something like this with particularly high tokens, you don't need to spend an awful lot of money on it. It's definitely worth thinking about. I'd be more inclined to run the local model, so I wasn't giving my code or the data on which it was based to Google as I was doing this. I think that's my sort of hesitation with a lot of these things. But if you're not doing anything very mission critical, I think it's quite a good way of getting assistance with your code. As with all things, if you're just letting it code for you, you're not understanding what your code is doing. And if it breaks, are you relying on having this coding assistant again to help you fix what the problems are?
I think it'd be a good way of learning, though, and just getting you, because sometimes you just need to get something up and running and then you can modify. But I do agree with you. If you get too reliant upon it, what are you actually adding?
Yeah, I think it's fair. Should we do a quick car corner with one story?
Yeah, go on then, the step. This is where your world and my world collide, I think.
Well, in many, many, many ways, I think your world and my world collide. So BMW have announced a new edition of their 4 Series BMW, I think I'm right in saying. It's the sporty one. It's the M4. Do you like an M4?
I do like an M4, but this is not just the M4. This is the M4 CS, and the CS ones are insanely quick and insanely expensive.
So the reason we're colliding on this is the VR46 Special Edition, and VR stands for Valentino Rossi, who is a MotoGP and even before that 500cc motorcycle rider of many years. Probably one of my heroes in the sport for sure. He's a little bit younger than me, but not by much, and has kept racing till I think he was 42. Anyway, it's his 46th birthday now, so he now races for BMW in a touring car equivalent, I think is what he does, and does quite well. He sort of finishes between second and third in lots of things. So, unsurprisingly, talented motorcycle rider turns into talented driver. He's got a collaboration with BMW that if you spend about £150,000 on one of these M4 CSs, not only do you get the car, which is presumably a collector's edition, it's got nice sort of yellow detailing. Yellow was very much his colour on the brakes and things like that. But you also get to go to Tavilla, which is his hometown, and he'll talk you around racing it around a track as well.
That's quite cool. I think this looks awesome. I do like my BMWs. I think this looks cool. And it's quite nice when they do like unique models like this, and they're only doing 46, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm a big fan. I mean, I've actually found a BMW I quite like here, so that's quite surprising.
Well, I'm surprised. This car would be awesome, but it is a lot of money.
Previously, there's been a Ford Transit Valentino Rossi edition for moving your enduro bikes around or something like that. So
okay.
He's moved up in the world a little bit, I think.
Yeah, no, fair play to him. I think it looks awesome. I'd love one of these.
It's an interesting marketing thing, isn't it, for BMW and Valentino Rossi to get together? I guess he's driving for them, so why not?
Yeah, why not? And he's a great name. Even somebody like me knows who he is, and I don't know the motorcycle world at all.
No, and there's a can of Monster named after him as well. I think you can get VR, the Doctor Edition Monster energy drink.
Okay. I'm not a Monster consumer, I must confess.
Neither am I. Should we do some media?
Let's do some media.
So I've been on a bit of a Bond kick recently, actually.
Yeah, I'm getting that.
Just because it's been such a long time since I sort of looked through them or watched them in any detail. I'm thoroughly enjoying my Bond watch through, I must say. And my first one, and there's two, is I did From Russia with Love, which I don't think I've watched since I was 14 or 15. Have you watched From Russia with Love?
Yeah, no, I've seen it. I've must have seen it within the last 10 years, I'm going to say. So I have watched it fairly. I had a bit of a Bond kick a while ago. And I'm a little so I'm back on my treadmill at the moment, and I'm tempted to pop this on the iPad and start watching some of the Bonds, because I love all the Bonds.
Yeah, this is a particularly good one, and I think I dismissed it when I was younger because not a lot seemed to happen in it, but that's actually because there was a proper spy film going on here. It wasn't stupid gadgets and things like that particularly, although there is, I think, the first gadget in the series happens here with the briefcase. But this is a proper spy story. Yeah,
no, it is cool. But I think you're going to allude to it. I think some of them are of their time, though, aren't they? That's the only problem with a few of them.
I'm okay with things being of their time. I just worry there's a bit much of Sean Connery coming out. Now, cards on the table. I think Sean Connery is the best Bond, and I'm not looking forward to the Pierce Brosnan years, it must be said. I think Roger Moore was probably my Bond if I think about it, because when I started watching Bond when I was, 9, 10, it was the Roger Moore films that were on the TV. So Roger Moore was my Bond, but I, of course, identified with the Scottish guy a lot more than I would with that. Having said that, Sean Connery is a problematic person, and I don't want to skip over the fact his attitudes to women and his acceptance that hitting women was a good thing. Not a good thing, but, was
acceptable.
Just acceptable for him, but which obviously you and I have no part of at all. Features in the movies. It features in this one where he hits the girl on the train, and it features in the next one I'm going to talk about, which is Goldfinger. And that comes out of the films, and if that was his choice and not the producer's choice, that gives me pause. Anyway, this is a really good film. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I think the critics' scores particularly hold that up. This is a strong Bond film.
Yeah, 100%. It's fantastic. Like I say, you're making me want to go back and rewatch, I think, quite a few of them. So maybe I need to find some time and work my way through it.
This was good. A couple of sort of top tips for the top hints about this is the bad guy in it, Red Grant, went on to play Quint in Jaws, which blew my mind. I could not believe it was the same actor.
Yeah, I didn't know that until you put that in the notes, I must confess.
Yeah, Robert Shaw went on to play Quint, the salty old sea dog in Jaws. He's British, from Lancashire, and he's playing an American captain off the coast of Maine or wherever Jaws was meant to be filmed. What a phenomenal actor.
Yeah, 100%. He's had a good career there.
He absolutely did. All right, I'll quickly talk about Goldfinger. I think Goldfinger is seen to be the definitive Bond movie by many, in that it has Sean at the peak of his powers, it has the car with the gadgets, it has the glamorous girls, it has the questionable names for the girls within there as well. It has the iconic "Do you expect me to talk? No, I expect you to die" line in it. It's a terrific all-in-one Bond film. However, for me, I think For Russia Love, watching him again is actually a stronger movie. This is a great film, don't get me wrong, but it has the crazy plan, the henchmen, and the gadgets, which the others don't have. I think For Russia Love was the last spy film. This was the first Bond film, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you're right. It's when they crossed over into the formula that they then served up very frequently there afterwards.
Yeah, and they filmed them back to back to back. Did you know that? They filmed Dr. No, Goldfinger, and From Russia with Love within a year of each other.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Wow,
it's
okay.
quite incredible, really, and the return they had in that. This is a good film. Again, there's some questionable attitudes to women in this, and the way I'd describe it is it's a bit rapey, and that I'm not trying to minimize that, but there's a sequence with one of the main female characters in a barn after he's been captured that's just wrong, really.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, I would agree with you on that. I think some of it just is a bit questionable, isn't it?
It's and you've got to view a film of its time. I think probably even in the 60s this wasn't very acceptable. And never mind in the Me Too era.
Yeah, that's very true. Sorry, I'm just looking at Rotten Tomatoes. It's taking me off onto The Man with the Golden Gun. They've given it 40%. I'm going to have to close Rotten Tomatoes now because I do not believe that.
The Man with the Golden Gun. Well,
it's my favourite Bond.
We'll get there. I'm going to very quickly talk about Reacher. I don't know if you've read the Lee Child books.
No, do you know what? I read a lot of books, but I've never really got round to Lee Child because I keep finding loads of other people to read. So I think he's done so many books that I just haven't got into his series yet.
They're very good. They're a bit disposable action. When you were going on a flight, you could probably finish the book on the flight or very soon after you land.
I quite like a book like that every now and again, though.
Yeah, they're very readable books. They're very well written. The action carries you along. He's quite an interesting character. Anyway, Amazon Prime has the rights to make the TV show version of this. Tom Cruise had to go at the movie show. They made 2 films in the Tom Cruise world. Tom Cruise looks nothing like Reacher. Reacher is meant to be at least 6'5" and built like a T. Tom Cruise is not that. I think the first Tom Cruise film was reasonable. Actually, it was quite a reasonable bit of entertainment. These TV shows are great though, and Alan Ritchson, who plays Reacher, was also in the league of that Extraordinary Gentleman film that was the Guy Ritchie film that came out recently. I can't remember what it's called.
No, I can't, but it's not that.
It's not that. Anyway, he is more like Reacher. The man is stacked. He's ripped. He's buff. He's hench, I think, is what the cool kids say. And he's very watchable, and they're quite well done. And frankly, if you have read any Reacher at all, you want to give them a crack. And even if you haven't, if you have Amazon Prime, I think they're worth a watch. First season's really good too.
Okay. The Guy Ritchie film, I think, is The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare that you were thinking of.
That's the one.
Okay, it's good to get a recommendation. I'm trying to avoid TV shows just for the time sink at the moment.
I think you want to check this one out. Another thing that I've yet to check out but I've heard about is Johnny Ive, ex of Apple, designer of many important Apple products, was on Desert Island Discs last weekend with Lauren Laverne, which is a BBC show. Anywhere in the world you can download and listen to. I'm sure it's probably worth a listen. I'm going to have a go this week. I obviously got caught up listening to other podcasts and doing things instead. Have you checked this out?
I haven't. It did come across my radar. Like you, I think it's something I would like to listen to.
Yeah, so that's out there as a thing for us to pay attention to. And you have one for us?
I've just Netflix. Put one in. This is a public service announcement. Netflix Drive to Survive starts on Friday this week, Friday the 7th of March. So if you're into Formula One and before the new season starts, you can watch Drive to Survive, which is filmed throughout all of last year. And obviously they make it into, I don't know, X number of episodes, and they usually have a theme through the episodes. It's quite cool. The only thing I don't like is to give you about a week to watch it before the 25 season starts. I wish they'd release it a little bit earlier, because last season finished at the end of November, maybe early December, but we've had nothing, a massive glut of nothing, and then it's like boom, 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 straight into the season. So why can't they release this a month ago and give us time to consume it and enjoy it? Maybe release like one a week would be good, or two a week, rather than just dropping all 10 in a one. But there you go. It
probably takes time to produce something like this, no?
I don't disagree with that, but maybe release it a week ago, 2 weeks. I don't know. It's just so close to the season. That's what cheeses me off a little bit. But anyway, go watch it. If you like Formula One, it's going to be awesome. I will buy Netflix for a month just to watch this.
Fair enough. Should we do some games?
Let's do it.
Tell us about Command and Conquer.
Other than Gran Turismo, this has got to be my favourite series. So look, EA, a company that I don't often say I give high praise to, but they've done a great thing. They've released the original Command & Conquer and Red Alert and Command & Conquer Generals. They've released the source code onto GitHub, so you can go and have a poke around in it, which I think is awesome. Why, I don't know why they've done it, but they're doing it, and I think it's really cool. I'm really tempted to crack open the Command & Conquer, because I really loved the original Command & Conquer. I think it was a very simple mechanic. It didn't get overcomplicated as more modern games did, but what a great thing to do.
I agree with you. I think this is great. I've played a bit of the open source versions of this, and they'll only be better as a consequence of EA actually putting this code out on GitHub. Did a good job with the restoration 4 years ago or something like that.
Yeah, it's about 4 or 5 years ago, and I've still played the restoration. Just the other day, I powered up my computer and I just saw it, and I thought, I'll just have a quick game of Command & Conquer for 10 minutes, and I love it.
Yep. So I think this is great stuff. Well done, EA. As you say, it's unusual to give them a pat on the back, but I think they deserve it for this. It's a great game. Go play it if you have the means.
Do it.
Moving on and back firmly into the land of rumours, there's a potential rumour that Half-Life 3 may be nearing completion. Are you a Half-Life fan?
I played the original one to death. I played a little bit of the second one, and then I've probably not really been in that universe for a long time.
Half-Life 2 is one of the greatest games of all time. The engine, the source engine that was featured in there, went on to be the sort of fundamental basis for lots of important games, including the remastered Counter-Strike, particularly Portal, and the physics that came along with the source engine for Portal. And Half-Life 2 is really the game that launched the Steam store, and more even so than Counter-Strike. There is a thought that, well, Half-Life 3, we've been waiting for it forever. There's lots of nerdery around Half-Life 3 confirmed, and Gabe Newell, lead of Valve, potentially leaking this, but this is just good news that we may get another one, because if nothing else, not only are they good games, but the stories are great and the engine is important, and Valve used to be a company that made computer games, not a store, so I'd love to see them actually make a fantastic computer game again.
Yeah, it's a bit sad, isn't it, in a way that they were a great computer game creator that then gave them the money to do the store, and then they've just done the store and they've not carried on doing computer games, but it'd be great to see them do it again. So yeah, this could be good news.
There's a conspiracy theory on the internet as well that this is where Valve will also release their next version of SteamOS, where you must have SteamOS in order to play Half-Life 3 and get everybody off Windows and playing their computer version of this.
I'm not sure I like that take so much myself. I'd rather make a game. Maybe it could run better on SteamOS, but I'd like them to make a game that is available to everybody.
You can understand the sort of draw behind it. Gabe has been fairly confirmed in his hatred of Windows and the fact that Microsoft are potentially locking into that environment, and it's hard to disagree with that sometimes.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I would love just to use my Mac Mini to do the gaming that I'd like to do, but it's just not doable, is it?
It's just not doable. Should we do a main show?
Let's do a main show.
Okay, so this is a thought experiment as much as anything else. It was sort of spurred by something that Jason Snell said on Upgrade this week, and that is, what would a world look like if Apple actually pulled out of the UK? What if this move that Apple have made to say, okay, we'll just turn off advanced data protection for UK users and we won't turn it back on, therefore we can't give you the key, isn't enough, and the UK government continue to pursue, no, we want you to open it up, we want access to end-to-end encryption of messages, we want all that stuff and you will give it to us now. At that point, all Apple can do, presumably, is walk away. What do you think of that?
Oh, it's quite a scary thought right now, in that, well, Apple go, we won't release any more patches to devices in your country forever, and we're going to cease selling new hardware there. It's quite interesting.
It's definitely an interesting thing to think about. I mean, the first thing is, I don't think this will happen, because can you imagine any politician in the UK going, yeah, I'm the one that made a multi-billion-dollar company that lots of Britons depend upon, not only for their livelihood in terms of developers, but actually people who have shops, repairs, screens, accessories, inward investment from Apple stores, all that stuff in Battersea, whatever they've given over the years. It's a hell of a thing to think about.
Yeah, Liz, you're right. It's not just the consumers that buy the devices. You're right. There's the rest of the ecosystem around it. I can't see it happening. But you could. Is there a world though where Apple has different tiered countries, maybe where they've got obviously USA, which is going to be their tier one country where they can do everything they want to do. Then you've got your UK, your Europe, and your China, that your tier 5 countries where they've restricted on their operations. Maybe we get less and less of a product as time goes on, and then you've probably got some countries in the middle, maybe that aren't tier 1 but aren't as bad as tier 5, and what they're allowed to sell to us, do with us, or having localized servers, all of that. I don't think it would happen, but we're not a big country. I guess we do bring a lot of users. We're an easy country for them to service because we're in the same language predominantly as the American equivalents. It's just hard to think through the mechanics of how that might work. And I guess the way it would work is you stop selling devices here, done. But could you imagine Apple reporting their numbers a year later when they're closing down certain markets?
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be a shock to the system. But if you've got an American government saying, no, you buy American, you buy an Apple device, we put that in your hands, and that's sort of the uptick for Apple, you might lose, 30 million customers in the United Kingdom who have iPhones or something like that, who buy them every 3 or 4 years or 5 years, and you just sort of double down in another part of the world. It's not impossible to envisage a situation where this would happen if they were pushed into such a place. And we see a souring relationship certainly between Europe and the United States, certainly from Ukraine and the United States. And I feel like there are elements of this popping up in Britain with the advanced data protection stuff going on here and how quiet it's been since that's happened.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it, the advanced data protection piece? Like, it's happened and there's been no further recourse on it. I find that bizarre.
Yeah, and you think maybe this is why Tim Cook was in the UK not that long ago, talking to Keir Starmer, talking to the King. I guess that's just still a crazy statement to me, about this kind of thing, reinforcing the amount of money that Apple spends here, because we spend a lot equally, a huge amount back. We're probably quite good for the United States economy, for Apple's economy. So it's just, how far would they have to be pushed, do you think, before they go, nope, we're out?
Yeah, nope, we can't service you anymore.
Would we be the first country in the world that they walked away from? They're still in China.
Are they still in Russia?
I think you can buy iPhones and they'll work there, but some of the network services won't work.
Right, okay.
Of course, that's about to change too, mind, because they seem quite like Russia, the Americans, at the moment.
It does feel like that's going to be the quickest U-turn that's ever happened.
Anyway, I mean, it's an interesting thought experiment that you've got to have a backup plan that should Apple walk away, how many of your devices would you stop getting security patches for? Who in your family would you suddenly have to start supporting with something else? And who knows if that something else is even Android, if they have to walk away as well.
Well, that's where I was going to go with it. Surely if America have to do it, Android would have to do it. And then would you just end up actually Android becomes the dominant player because every country ends up with its own flavour of Android that's for that country, that's state approved, I guess is the right word.
And the world disintegrates further.
I completely agree.
Yeah, so I mean, it's worth thinking about that a little bit and keep in the back of your mind, should we ever need to switch off, what you going to do? Are you going to go all Windows? No, because that's an American company as well. So keep your Linux brain ready, I think, Chris.
Yeah, there's just no good answer to it, is there, I think. Mine's somewhat blowing. I mean, I am walking away from Apple for my headphones. Maybe I'll walk away from them for other devices.
Speaking of other devices, thank you for giving us such a wonderful segue. Did you see the Framework event this week?
I haven't seen the event, but I've read the press releases. And I quite like what Framework are doing, I must confess.
So, American company, so we'll just gloss over that based on our last discussion, but an interesting American company, and an interesting consumer-focused company. We've talked about them before. I almost ordered one of the laptops last year. And their shtick is that they're user repairable. So unlike most laptops, which are these days glued entirely together, Framework will sell you a laptop where you put it all together. So you put the RAM in, you put the SSD in, you put the keyboard on, you fit the bezel around the screen, you click a couple of things, and you're off to the races. And should anything break, you can replace it. So you can get in there, you can put in a new SSD. Imagine that. Imagine just being able to put in a 4 terabyte SSD in your MacBook Pro.
And it's not just if it breaks, though, is it? It's if you want to upgrade, to Wi-Fi from 6 to 7, or put an Ethernet port in. Because, our needs do change. How often have we bought and sold equipment because our requirements have changed?
Absolutely. And they have been good stewards. So the first device we're talking about is their Framework 13, which is the one I almost bought. I think this is the 3rd generation of this laptop now. And you can still, in your 1st generation device, for example, buy the higher resolution screen and fit that to the same chassis that this comes with. Or you can pull out the main board and put in one of the newer processors with improved heat cooling and the sort of features in this laptop. I think this is great for people who have got those 1st generation devices. They've still got a pathway to have the most up-to-date thing if they want to, plus they've been able to upgrade, the components within that right up to this point.
Yeah, it's great, isn't it? And it looks nice. It looks a nicely made piece of equipment. It doesn't look like a DIY laptop that you've put together yourself.
No, and I've been looking at a few reviews of these things, and there have been little issues with them. They're not quite as well made as a thoroughly glued together MacBook Pro or Surface Pro or one of those. But that's kind of a consequence of the fact you can take them apart so easily. You only need one tool to take them apart. It comes with the screwdriver, so you can take the bits off. But if you've ever broken a part of your laptop, let's say you damage one of the USB-C ports on your MacBook Pro, you're knackered. Whereas this, you can just pop it out and stick another one in. If you smash your screen, Apple is going to charge you a lot of money for that replacement. You can swap one out for about 150 quid, I think. So it's a very different approach to computing that Framework have taken here. And I think it's all to the good. We've probably gone too far down the road of no user replaceable parts. This is striking a balance in the other direction for me.
Yeah, I agree with that. And it's supported by the vendor. You can buy the parts from them. They're all going to work. You can swap them in and out. I think it's fantastic. I really like the concept.
Yeah, and you don't have to buy the parts from the vendor. It's a standard SSD, so you can put in a bigger, drive if you want. They're modular ports on the bottom, the USB-C ports or HDMI or whatever they are. You can 3D print them. They've published all the recipes for them, for want of a better, the schematics for them on the internet, as well as the electronics within them. So people have started to develop third-party modules, so you don't have to buy them from the company. So that sort of commoditization of it, I think, is a great thing.
Yeah, but like buying the network port to go in your laptop, it's £40. That's pretty good, isn't it? It seems a bargain.
I think the USB-C ones are £9.
Then that's awesome.
It's really
good. £9.
So
you're correct.
Yeah, so this is the Framework 13-inch, like I say, the 3rd generation of that. There wasn't a lot of talk about their bigger laptop. There's a Framework 16 as well. They didn't really mention that during the event, but I think that's been fairly kept up to date. But the big surprise were the 2 new products they announced. So the first one was the Framework Laptop 12, which is obviously smaller than 13. But this one is a touchscreen. So it's 12.2 inches. You're able to fold it over on its back. We haven't actually seen the final sort of version of this yet, but it's colourful. It's user repairable. It's upgradable in the same way that the 13 is, and it's a new form factor for Framework, and these just look fun.
It does look fun. It's also a clamshell, so you can fold it back around on itself. It does look a great, fun device. Good size, 12-inch. I think that sounds pretty good. You've got 4 ports on it where you can swap things, cards in and out. I think this looks fantastic.
I'm with you. And if this is, I'll put, again, scare quotes for the second time this podcast, cheap. If this is around or less than £1,000/$dollars, this is a really compelling device in the MacBook. I loved my little MacBook, not iBook, the first MacBook, the 12-inch one that came along.
Yep.
I absolutely loved it. It was, the portability of that thing was terrific, as was, the original MacBook is the one I'm thinking of, the one with the terrible keyboard. If something like this is user replaceable, bigger hard drive, you can swap it out and you can put the next generation AMD chips in them or something like that. I think this is a really compelling device.
Yeah, if I go back to a Mac laptop, I could see me getting a little Air, because I just love the weight of it. You pop in your bag, you don't even know it's there. Whereas the Pros are rightfully quite chunky and heavy. I'd love a device like this. I really enjoy my little iPad because you just you chuck it in the bag, you don't feel like you're carrying anything, and when you get it out, off you go. It's not ideal for all kinds of work, but if you're email browsing the web, that's what this device is for. It's not what you're going to use to code all day, but then you have a monitor or what have you for that.
But these days I think it's fine. There's enough Thunderbolt/USB-C support for bigger screens, and these will have the graphics Moxie to drive something like that. This could be the one device that you take around with you. And the fact that it's upgradable to whatever SSD size that you want and are actually comfortable with, rather than being locked into, how much is an upgrade to 4 terabytes in a MacBook?
I don't know. A lot. Thousands probably. And then because you're buying to keep it for the next 3 years, say, what happens if you want to keep it for a 4th year? What happens if you want to swap it because you become into video halfway through? You just can't do it, and it's very wasteful.
And you want to pass it on to your family or whatever. The fact that you can upgrade a couple of components in this, and they've effectively got a new large performant laptop, is a big deal.
Yeah, I completely agree. I really, really like the look of this.
Yeah, and then the last thing they introduced, and this was a bit of a change for Framework, is they actually introduced a desktop as well. So the Framework desktop, which is mini, it's quite a small device really, runs on some new AMD Ryzen AI Max processor, which is quite performant for games apparently. It has a built-in Radeon 8060S graphics card with it. This is silicon in a chip, which is an interesting choice in their desktop, which they didn't go in the laptop. Maybe it's the power demands of it. But this is quite an impressive desktop, and iFixit were blown away by how sort of repairable and modular this was.
Yeah, again, I think this looks pretty cool. I could see me going for a device like this because I wouldn't mind to buy a desktop at some point. I don't need anything incredibly whizzy I'm going to go with. But something like this would be ideal for me because it's something that I could get now, play the games I want to play on it now, but I could always upgrade it in the future if I want to upgrade it. And I think that's really cool. And I just like the look of it. Like you can customize the front. You can put different plastic bits in the front. You can have a carry handle on it or not. You can really make it your own. And I quite like that customization that you can do with it. I think that's quite cool. I think people like to put their own mark on something, especially in a world where everybody's got a silver laptop or everybody's got a silver desktop. It's quite nice to actually do your own thing with it. So I'm really into this. I can see a world where one of these is in it at some point when I choose to upgrade my gaming desktop.
I'm with you. I think this is great. The board that it runs on starts at $800, which is great. You've got all that flexibility within the case. The base Framework desktop comes even lower. 8-core Ryzen AI Max, 32 gigs of RAM at $1,099. And it's 5 gig Ethernet built in as well. I mean, I think this is a really compelling little device. If you wanted to dip your toe into a performant PC desktop, bang a gaming edition of Linux on there like Bazite or something like that, you're going to have a really wonderful time with this device.
Yeah, and you can stick 2 terabytes in it for £200. You can't do that in an Apple device, can you?
You can't do that. It's DDR5 RAM, so it's nice and fast, good graphics cards. The fact that it's got a PCIe times 4 headers on it as well, so you could put on bigger graphics cards yourself if you wanted. And presumably in 2 years' time we'll be back talking about this again with whatever new mainboard Framework have designed to put in there, and it'll be an absolute piece of piss to swap it out. I know it's a desktop and you can do that anyway, but it's a tidy sized desktop.
Yep, and you can have translucent panel on it. You can pick your tiles. You can have different expansion cards. So if you want USB-C or an SD card in it, you can literally make it how you want to make it, which I think is pretty cool.
for a decent amount of money. You're not getting charged Alienware prices for some horrendous gaming desktop. $2,000 out the gate.
Yeah, it's mad, isn't it? But I think this is a great little device.
I think it's great, and I think the whole lineup that Framework are refreshing here, in a very Apple-like way, if you watch the thing, is really good. And the other thing that I thought was quite interesting, and we've linked to the Ars Technical article about this as well, is that they seem to be settling on AMD chips more than Intel. Sorry, Intel, you're not doing well in this space, are you? And the battery life on some of these devices is sort of 18, 19 hours for the laptop chips. These Ryzen AI chips are becoming competitive with what Apple is offering.
Yeah, it does feel like Intel is turning to the also ran at the moment, which is a bit of a shame for the history that they've obviously had. But it's great to see AMD still going.
AMD are sticking it to them, and they're hanging in a market against all the the Raspberry Pis, the Apple Silicons, the RISC-V boards, and all the rest of it. The x86 manufacturer still pushing forward, and it's incredible the longevity of that platform. But you see, now they can get the power efficiency as well. Maybe the story isn't over for x86.
Yeah, well, it feels like it's going to be around for a while, isn't it? Unless they can sort out some form of translation layer so I can play my Windows game on my ARM device. We've got some of it, but it's not there yet, is it?
Yeah, I think we kind of got that. I think it's developers not doing it and libraries not being ported for it. For example, a lot of the VPN stuff doesn't work on my brain's gone blank for the ARM devices. The VPNs aren't there. The security software and the libraries are at the back end for the ARM devices, which is why you're not seeing some of them work. And I presume Photoshop have managed to make the conversion, haven't they? But if other developers actually put their minds to it and think of another way of doing this, there's no reason we can't get there. Apple got there quite quickly.
Yeah, more will come over time, I think. But yeah, it does feel like we're going to have two different chip architectures for a little while.
It does. So there we go. A little framework feature, a company that you and I both think quite a lot of, I think.
Yeah, like I say, I'm going to be thinking about it for my next gaming PC. I think I could be there because I'm not a serious gamer, but I want something serious-ish.
Fair enough. App of the week?
Do it.
App of the week this week is Hyperspace, which I haven't actually tried, but I just wanted to feature it on the podcast because I like the developer. So Hyperspace is developed by John Siracusa. He is very much at the foremost a Mac developer, not an iOS developer, as featured on the ATP podcast. I like his attitude to criticism, I think, is probably the best way of describing it. He's a thoughtful guy, as John Siracusa. He's been writing this app in sort of out in public, talking about it quite a lot on ATP. He released it last week, and this is an app designed to reclaim disk space. I think it's a great name, Hyperspace. It looks at the APFS, which is the file system on Macs. APFS is very good at making copies of things, flawless copies of things quickly, and as a consequence, you may not realize that you're taking up far more space by very slightly changing a copy, a bit of metadata within that, rather than the actual file itself. That can lead to lots of excess files cluttering up your hard disk, and what Hyperspace does is it looks through them in a very clever way, and for an amount of money, will securely and safely delete or reclaim the space that those extra files are taken up on your hard disk. It's a really careful app that you spent a lot of time developing, and just quite an interesting thing that I think it might be worth keeping in mind if you suddenly find yourself running out of disk space.
Yeah, I think I agree with everything you've said. I like the developer. Whilst you were talking, I've just downloaded, installed it, pointed at my home folder, and it said it can't find any space to reclaim, which I'm not surprised about. This is a fresh installed Mac. I've only had it a month. So I'm not surprised I haven't found anything. But it's a good app. It's a great idea. And I'm quite impressed how quickly he's turned an idea into an app that he's got in the marketplace that he can now sell. It's really good.
Yep, I think it's a good one. So if you've had your Mac a couple of years, it's become a bit cluttered. It's running APFS, which almost all of them are these days. There's not a lot of HFS Plus left lying around. And you want a bit of disk space back, check out Hyperspace.
Agreed.
Thing of the week.
Thing of the week. So this was something I went and saw this week, which was the F1 Expo in London. This is a collection of cars, films, memorabilia for Formula One, and it's moving around the world. So it's off to the Netherlands next week. So it's last chance to sort of catch it. It was just quite a cool thing to do with some friends. you could just see some good stuff. You could test your reactions. You could see how Formula One has evolved through the years, and they had various interviews, recorded and things. It was just a good Formula One nerdy event for a couple of hours, and it actually cost £30, which something in the centre of London, which is quite a select audience, to only cost £30 entrance fee, I thought was actually pretty reasonable. So that's what I did. And if you're in the Netherlands, I'd recommend you go see it when it comes to your country.
Very nice. It's in the Excel. What did you think of the Excel?
I didn't really see much of it. It was peeing down with rain, and you had to go around a funny side bit to get into it. But I have been to Excel before. It is gargantuan.
It's a huge place. I did a conference there a few years ago. I was there for 7 days, I think, altogether, in and out of the Excel for various things. It's a vast building. Yeah,
it's fast, but literally the F1 bit was in like the first corner of it, so we didn't actually see much of the Excel Centre, which I was quite happy about.
Fair enough. I think we can call that a show, Chris.
Yeah, I think so. So if anyone wants to get in contact, Rod is at g5maniac@mastodon.scot. He's also on Blue Sky, and he is at g5maniac.bsky.social. I am on Mastodon, and I am at _CJP at mastodon.social. You can watch on YouTube by going to our website, click on the YouTube link, or you can drop us an email at wakefromsleep@protonmail.com.
Talk to you next week, Chris.
Cheers, Rod.